आज का भारत सिर्फ आगे नहीं बढ़ रहा, भारत खुद को नेक्स्ट लेवल पर ले जा रहा है.
Together with my friend Prime Minister Modi, who I was pleased to see again last night, we took on our bilateral relationship and raised it to its highest level ever.
We need new answers. That's why we are coming to India.
And as a citizen of Nepal, India's closest neighbor, I feel a deep sense of pride and
Hello and welcome to The World Report. I'm Ruby Barlow. Today, let's take a look at some of our top headlines. Trump says he will decide on Iran deal soon as to whether to extend the ceasefire. However, it looks like there will still be central issues of disagreement. According to reports, senior officials met in the Situation Room for 2 hours. Iranian officials say a political understanding has been reached in negotiations. Iranian news agencies have said in reports that US President Trump wants a fabricated victory out of the deal currently being negotiated between the United States and Iran. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth has said the United States can restart strikes against Iran if a deal cannot be reached diplomatically. He has said US President Donald Trump is patient and wants to make a great deal to ensure Iran remains without a nuclear weapon. Hegseth sounds the alarm over China's military spending and has urged American allies in Asia to increase their defense spending to 3.5% of GDP. Hegseth also says US-Taiwan arms sales remain unchanged and that any change related to Taiwan will rest with President Donald Trump. The move comes from a broader push within the United States for more self-reliant alliances globally. Israeli forces crossed the Litani River in Lebanon, expanding their ground offensive even further. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has confirmed IDF foes are now north of the strategic river. Israel and Lebanon are due to hold talks in Washington this week. Voting starts today in the Mediterranean country of Malta, with polls showing the ruling party is likely to stay in power. The Labour Party may win a record-breaking fourth term after Maltese Prime Minister Robert Abela called a snap election 1 year early. Three Latvian climbers have fallen to their deaths on Mount McKinley in the Denali National Park in Alaska, United States. A fourth member survived and was rescued, a climbing team from their country has confirmed. Specialist cave dive rescuers have found one of the people trapped in Lao caves, while 4 remain trapped and 2 are still missing. The rescue teams have members from Laos, Thailand, Indonesia, Australia, France, and Japan. We start now with the official negotiations going on between the United States and Iran. They remain stalled today as both sides signal that a comprehensive diplomatic breakthrough has not yet been achieved. The Iranian Foreign Ministry announced that despite ongoing technical discussions, no formal agreement has been finalized or signed with the United States. In Washington, President Donald Trump has deferred a final determination on a circulated draft proposal, stating that the administration requires additional security guarantees regarding nuclear enrichment limits and verification protocols. The diplomatic standstill comes amid intensive maritime tracking in Southeast Asia, where Western intelligence agencies continue to monitor Iranian energy shipping routes. While back-channel diplomatic tracks are expected to continue next week, both administrations face mounting domestic and regional pressure to either solidify the parameters of the temporary framework or return to a posture of open economic confrontation. Now we're joined by Professor Georgi Toleraya, who is a geopolitical commentator, joining us now from Moscow. Georgi, thank you very much for joining us today on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you here on NewsX World. It seems that negotiations between Washington and Tehran have stalled. There's been some good progress indicated through this week, but we have seen both sides signal that a breakthrough hasn't been achieved yet, that the rest of the world was anxiously looking for. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has announced that despite some technical discussions, there hasn't been a formal agreement finalised, and it looks like some of the final points of disagreements remains with technical matters regarding nuclear enrichment limits and verification protocols. Now, Professor Tolaraya, of course, the matter of Iran's nuclear program has been a polemic matter all throughout this war, and especially regarding these negotiations. Do you think that perhaps we could see a dissolution of Iran's nuclear matter, custody being given to a third party, perhaps an Iranian ally country, or perhaps a different option that isn't on the table yet? What remains for the future of the Iranian nuclear program at this stage?
I'm rather optimistic that the talks are going on in such difficult manner, because that means they're serious. And it's a far cry from what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, so I can only envy that US and Iran are on the way to finding some solution. It's not easy, but they're going there. I wouldn't estimate the outcome only by the public information, because this information is one-sided. Iran is highly distrustful of US, and rightfully so. So we don't know really what they're talking about. I feel that the issue of nuclear program of Iran is not the crucial one, because I understand that Iran is about to surrender its highly enriched uranium to a third party like China, or maybe other country. And Iran has firmly expressed it has no plans to create the nuclear weapons. But several other issues which are not publicized by the United States are more important for Iran, like the Strait of Hormuz. Iran wants to control it and to get some fees for the passing of the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not going to give up what is achieved in the course of this war. It wants to defreeze some of its assets and lift some sanctions. This is not publicized by the United States, but I think these issues are the most important. And unless solutions are found on these issues, there's not going to be the final solution. So let's wait and see. I am so far as not much pessimistic, but well, we shall see what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Professor Tolaraya, what do you think will be going on inside the Iranian government negotiating team at the moment? Do you think that they will be pushing for a diplomatic resolution here, or are they looking at this situation and saying that they can outlast the United States? There's been some comments recently from President Trump saying that he believes that the United States has more military might and therefore can outlast Iran, which some analysts, some commentators were saying was the Iranian strategy. What do you think the negotiators are discussing right now? Do you think that there's points that they've put on the table specifically for concession? What does it look like to you? What indications do you get of what the Iranian position is at the moment?
Again, I got no information. It's very hard to judge unless you have some hard data. But judging by the spirit and the mood in the negotiation, Iranian position is stronger, and they can certainly outlast the November elections in the US. After which, unless Trump declares a victory and has some grounds to do so, the US position may change radically. So Iranian position is much stronger. And I think that the 3-4 points that I've mentioned, they'll stick to them, and they'll try to get as much concession from the United States as they can.
Mm-hmm. Professor Tolaraya, there's still, of course, a massive blockade against Iran by the US naval forces. Of course, the blockade does remain in the Strait of Hormuz. There has also been strikes this week as well between the United States and Iran. Do you think at this stage any further military action from either side would put these negotiations at risk, as it does seem to be significant progress being made so far? It seems that the United States just needs Donald Trump's approval on their part. But do you think that there is a possibility that we even could see hostilities resume if it may put these negotiations at risk?
If hostilities resume, I think that would only harden Iran negotiations positions. And as I've mentioned earlier, they have to just to be patient till the November election. Unless Trump gets some kind of a deliverable result for this election, he will lose it, and his position will be much, much weaker. So I don't think that any kind of pressure against Iran, unless it's of course an annihilating strike against all the country, will make U.S. position any stronger.
Okay. Professor Tola Riot, thank you very much for joining us today on the program. Always a pleasure to have you as a guest. Thank you very much for joining us today. We move now to a developing story coming out of the United States. Federal authorities are investigating a severe in-flight security emergency after a commercial airliner was forced to make an emergency landing last night. United Airlines Flight 2005, en route from Chicago to Minneapolis, diverted from Madison, Wisconsin, after the crew declared a level 4 passenger threat, the highest security tier in commercial aviation. According to operational logs, a passenger attempted to breach the cockpit door roughly 20 minutes into the flight, prompting United Airlines to issue an urgent fleet-wide alert instructing all airborne aircraft to secure their flight decks. Law enforcement and FBI agents boarded the plane upon landing and took the suspect, identified as a Russian national, into custody. Federal investigators are currently interrogating the suspect and processing the aircraft. No injuries to passengers or crew members have been reported, and federal officials emphasise that the flight deck remained secure throughout the incident. Now, this latest update occurred just this morning. The flight took off very early this morning and was due to land a couple of hours later, but did have to make this emergency landing in Madison, Wisconsin. Now, this latest threat was declared a level 4 passenger threat, which is the highest in security tier aviation. Level 1 refers to drunk or abusive behaviour. Level 2 refers to physically abusive behaviour. Level 3, life-threatening behaviour. And level 4, the last one that was alerted this morning on this flight, was attempted or actual breach of the flight deck. Now, the fact that this person has been identified as a Russian national now does add another layer of details to this incident. However, of course, there has been no injuries to passengers or crew members reported so far. Now, to discuss these latest developments, we're joined by Dr. Vandana Singh, an aviation expert, joining us from New Delhi. Good afternoon, Dr. Singh. Thank you very much for joining us today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you to discuss this latest development coming out of the United States, a level 4 threat that was announced on this flight, forcing it to take an emergency landing. Now, Dr. Singh, how common are events like these? United Airlines did issue an alert to all of their other planes in the air. Should we be alarmed?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me on your show. What I would like to say here is that these are times of war, especially post 9/11. We all know a lot of measures have been taken. Also post 2003, all equipments are really made in such a way that the cockpit doors are absolutely impenetrable. That means even if there's a grenade blast, or there is something ballistic, or there is something over there, that will not open. So they have a primary barrier, they have a secondary barrier. So first and foremost, it is incredibly unlikely for anybody to storm into the cockpit, since these measures are taken, especially on equipments like Boeing 737 and other such equipments. Also, we have what we call air marshals that are always on board flights. Of course, this is confidential, it is not disclosed because they travel as a common man on these flights. So what you call law enforcement officers are always there. But coming back to your question, these incidents can happen. These incidents are common. Let's not forget, just maybe it was just few days back, I think it was an Alaskan airplane where a passenger was heavily intoxicated and was heavy on drugs, had to be, caused a lot of disruptive behavior, was taken out, and of course heavy fines and actions were taken. So it's not that this incident has not happened before or this incident will not happen later, but what is most important is the protocol that's followed, that the crew members know exactly the actions to take for a level 1, level 2, level 3 and level 4 threat that you just mentioned. Over to you.
Dr. Singh, there's also been some details come out. Of course, airline security is a very hot topic, as you mentioned, after post 9/11, especially in the United States as well. There has also been some other details that have come out. Of course, it is a very developing story. Do we need to rethink aviation travel in this modern age, especially considering the role that it did play in the COVID pandemic as well? There are other risks, not just related to safety of passengers, but also health of passengers as well. Of course, it is a very convenient way for people to get around, but do we need to rethink aviation after so many risks to people's health and safety?
So let's just say one thing. We all know that aviation is the safest mode of transportation, the quickest mode, the fastest mode to move from point A to point B, and nothing is going to change that. What has to change is the safety protocol. One has to keep on rethinking, one has to keep on re-strategizing, and one has to keep on upgrading and raising the bar as much as one can. These are times of AI, these are times of artificial intelligence, and we know that technology is improving by the minute, by the second. Therefore, this has to be taken care of, and one has to really keep on strengthening one's safety protocols. So the question is not about rethinking that one should even fly or not, or the mental health of people, or safety of humans. Yes, more important is what we are doing in the aviation industry in terms of equipment, in terms of CRM, which is crew resource management, training of personnel, air marshals on the flight, and we are always up in the lead when it comes to taking care of such threats, whether it's level 1, level 2, level 3 or level 4. And I even just told you that when it comes to a cockpit, it's not possible to penetrate. It's incredibly not possible because they have a primary barrier and a secondary barrier. The pilot's job is to fly the aircraft, keep the passengers safe. He will not unlock the door, and then of course he will declare the emergency and go to the nearest airport where there is facility with law enforcement officers to take the unruly passenger in. And in this case, this is exactly what happened. The flight from ORD, Chicago, to Minneapolis got diverted to Madison here. In this case, MSN directly on the route to Minneapolis, and this is where the action was taken. let's not forget there are legal repercussions, there are financial repercussions, and also it can be, as per federal imprisonment for up to 20 years for such passengers. So question is not that should we even fly, the question is what measures are we taking and how are we upgrading ourselves day after day, knowing how the technology is upgrading itself. Over to you, ma'am.
Dr. Singh, it's been a pleasure to have you on the broadcast today. Thank you very much for joining us to discuss this development out of the United States. Now we move to some updates coming out of the Ebola outbreak in Africa. As the Ebola outbreak caused by the rare Bundibugyo strain continues in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda, the World Health Organization has said that early detection and community mobilization remain critical to saving lives, while potential treatments and vaccines are still being assessed. As of the 29th of May, the World Health Organization has estimated 906 suspected cases in the DR of Congo, including 223 suspected deaths. Confirmed cases stand at 134 in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with 17 confirmed deaths. Uganda has reported 9 confirmed cases, including 1 death. Now, the WHO said that it is currently working with the governments of DR Congo and Uganda to advance the evaluation of drugs and vaccines while expanding medical treatment capacity. 3 candidate therapeutic drugs and 2 candidate vaccines have been included for further research. Let's in fact listen in to what the WHO official has had to say.
Now we have this candidate therapeutics and vaccine. WHO is working closely with the government of both countries to support the assessment of this candidate medical countermeasure, while at the same time and urgently scaling up care capacities to ensure all patients in those affected communities can access optimized supportive care that can help save lives.
Now we are joined by Dr. Ishwar Gilada, a virologist and consultant in infectious diseases at the Unison Medicare and Research Centre. Joining us from Mumbai, Dr. Gilada, thank you very much for joining us today on NewsX World. A pleasure to have your analysis on this latest Ebola outbreak and your expertise as well in infectious diseases. Now, the WHO has said that these cases are now going well into the hundreds, nearly 906 suspected cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo, including more than 200 suspected deaths. Of course, all those deaths haven't been identified as of yet. However, there's been several outbreaks of Ebola in Congo in past years. I believe it was first discovered in Congo as well. But this particular strain doesn't have a vaccine, and we're only looking at emergency medicines only now. With this many past outbreaks and the toll that it takes on human life, Doctor, why haven't we seen further medical research being taken up until now?
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Ruby. I would like to compare the outbreak now. Along with that was one of the worst one was 2014, and the last one was 2018. And this is a beautiful graph shown on the BMJ, which is an international medical journal. What it says that the current outbreak is one of the fastest growing outbreaks of all outbreaks up till now. There have been 13 outbreaks today, till today. And this is a third outbreak of Bundibugyo strain among the 13 outbreaks. Now, how it is different than others is that, number one, if you calculate the number of cases 2 weeks before and now, it has been doubling every week. So it has been never that fast earlier. That means even though the current death rate which shows out of your WHO saying 900 plus suspected cases and 220 deaths, and CDC Atlanta, USA says about 1200 suspected cases and 240 deaths. Whatever parameters we apply is 20 to 25% death rate. With the previous 2014 and 18, the death rate is around 50 to 60%. In 2014, there were around same 1200 number of cases total. And in 2018, there were only 230 cases. But death rate was around 50 to 60%. So we should not be only worried about death rate, which was around 25 to 90% in previous outbreaks. But currently, the infectiousness is higher than the previous one. So though the death rate is lower, around 20 or 25%, we'll have more people dying and more people getting affected or infected. And some of them may carry the virus for longer period in their semen and breast milk. If there is a lady who is already feeding a child, she can carry virus in breast milk for maybe months. So I think the current outbreak is little bit different than the previous outbreak. Number one. Number two, it is a outbreak which has no treatment and no vaccine. The vaccine is only for Zaire strain. That too, it is only with WHO 500,000 doses and with the US another 500,000 doses. Government of India, along with the Serum Institute of India in Pune, they are trying to make the vaccine as early as possible. Has been a moment from the Oxford University from UK and doing that same AstraZeneca vaccine on the same model they are trying to develop. If they get primers now, they will take 2 to 3 months to develop the vaccine. And India can go ahead and create that vaccine at an affordable cost and provide to Africa. So India doing vaccination or vaccine research is much better than anybody else doing, because India can provide in quantity and affordable kind of a cost. And that's the reason that we are currently banking on India's Vaccine Maitri or Friendship of Vaccine program, which was also seen during COVID. Ruby.
Dr. Gilada, of course, in this area, there's been reports of the health workers struggling to get the resources that they need, struggling to get the assistance that they need. Of course, there's connectivity issues, but there's also reports of the outbreak spreading into areas controlled by armed militant groups as well. Can you speak to some of these difficulties that health workers on the ground face tackling this disease beyond infectiousness?
You see, in middle part of Africa, particularly which usually we call them third world countries, they always have difficulty with healthcare workers, their preparedness, and whatever PPE kits and etc. they are required. And DRC Congo or Sudan or Uganda or Burundi, Rwanda, they have been always some kind of conflict zones. In conflict zones, reach out is difficult. Moreover, what has happened in Zaire or DRC Congo now, there have been two instances of burning the tents where the people were cared, and the suspected cases fled from there, and they got mixed up with the other population. So if this kind of things happen, then the epidemic or outbreak can go out of proportion, which will be out of control of everybody. So my appeal to those people is that please cooperate with human beings, particularly medical caregivers. They are struggling hard with the given circumstances, with given PPE kits. They don't have so many kits to test. I'm glad that Government of India dispatched a lot of such material, which can be helpful to the DRC and also in the Uganda, where they can do a lot of tests. So PPE kits, testing material, medicines for the supportive care, because in this currently there is only supportive care available, so that people should not die of neglect, people should not die of for reach of ICU kind of care or antibiotics or any kind of fever medicine. So I think in this situation, it is difficult scenario. WHO is coordinating with these countries, India is supporting them, and the richer countries, particularly Europe and America, they should also become a little bit more humanitarian and try to support these people because they are in difficult hours.
Dr. Gilada, thank you very much for joining us today on the program. A pleasure to hear your expert analysis on this Ebola outbreak currently going on in Africa. Now we move to some updates coming out of the war between Ukraine and Russia. The war in Ukraine is showing no signs of slowing down, with both Russia and Ukraine reporting major military operations over the past week as fighting intensifies across multiple fronts. Russia's defense ministry says its forces have captured 10 more settlements in the Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy and Zaporizhia regions. Moscow also claimed its air defense systems shot down more than 2,600 Ukrainian drones during the same period. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the current battlefield situation suggests the conflict may be moving toward its final stage, although he acknowledged it is impossible to predict when the war will end. Putin also said Russian strikes on Kyiv were in response to Ukrainian attacks inside Russian-controlled territory. Meanwhile, Ukraine says its forces carried out strikes on several Russian military targets, including the Volgograd oil refinery, supply depots, air defense systems and drone command centers. Air raid sirens and explosions were reported in Kyiv as Russia launched another wave of missile attacks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that Russia is preparing for a new round of large-scale offensives. He is urging the United States and European allies to accelerate air defense support, including the delivery of Patriot missile systems. As both sides step up operations, the conflict appears to be entering another critical and potentially escalatory phase. We now move to some comments coming from the Australian Defence Minister, Richard Marles. Now, growing concerns over maritime security and freedom of navigation have taken the centre stage at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, where defence leaders warn that disputes at sea could have far-reaching consequences for global stability. Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles said contests across strategic waterways are reshaping the maritime domain and could undermine the rules-based international order. He pointed to tensions in the Strait of Hormuz and the South China Sea as examples of challenges that threaten freedom of navigation and international law. Marles also called for greater transparency from China regarding its maritime activities, saying such a step would help strengthen regional stability and security across the Indo-Pacific. His remarks were echoed by Qatari Defence Minister Sheikh Saud bin Abdul Rahman, who warned against the use of international waterways as a tool of political pressure. He said any precedent set in one strategic choke point, could quickly be replicated in other parts of the world. The comments come amid heightened global attention on critical shipping routes that carry a large share of the world's trade and energy supplies. The Shangri-La Dialogue, Asia's premier security forum, has brought together top military officials, diplomats and policymakers to discuss the growing security challenges facing the region and the world. Let's have a listen in now to Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles.
Contests on the surface of the sea are also reshaping the maritime domain. Last year, the twin drivers of Iran's strategy of proxy warfare and the ongoing Yemeni civil war saw militia attacks on strategic choke points in the Red Sea, disrupting the principal maritime corridor connecting Europe, the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific. The costs were enormous. Rerouting of shipping, higher insurance premiums, extended transit times, a global economic hit delivered through the control of a geographic bottleneck. This year, the costs have escalated even further as the conflict with Iran has seen an effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz. In the South China Sea, the region continues to contend with extensive militarisation, the construction of artificial islands and increasingly assertive naval and Coast Guard operations. Almost 10 years have passed since an arbitral tribunal constituted under UNCLOS made a unanimous, clear and binding ruling in the South China Sea arbitration between the Philippines and China. Australia has consistently joined international calls for compliance with this decision and for the disputes to be resolved peacefully in accordance with international law. Using military might or coercion to force change undermines any viable international order, be that in land borders in Europe, maritime boundaries in Asia or elsewhere, and also in the subsea domain, which is exposed to a new vector of coercion that undermines the security of sovereign states. Now, I value and appreciate the hours of dialogue I've had with my Chinese counterparts. The stabilisation of the Australia-China relationship over the past 4 years has been genuinely important. and both Australia and China have worked hard to maintain it. China is our largest trading partner. China's economic success is connected to that of our region. And Australia wants a stable and productive relationship with China, and we believe that's achievable. And China has a real opportunity here. A commitment to transparency around its maritime operations would be a meaningful contribution to the regional stability upon which China's own prosperity.
We now move to some breaking news regarding the Ebola outbreak in Africa. Health authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo have reported a sharp increase in suspected Ebola cases, raising fresh concerns about the spread of the deadly virus. Health Minister Samuel Roger Kamba announced that the number of suspected cases has risen to 1,028, up from 906 just a day earlier. Officials also confirmed that 225 cases have now been verified through testing. These latest figures suggest the outbreak continues to expand, putting additional pressure on the country's healthcare system and response teams. Authorities are working to track contacts, isolate cases, and contain further transmission of the highly infectious disease. Ebola, which causes severe fever, bleeding and organ failure in some patients, has triggered multiple outbreaks in Central Africa over the past decades. Now, health officials are urging vigilance as efforts continue to prevent a wider public health emergency. Some further breaking news, this time coming from West Asia regarding Hezbollah. Tensions have escalated further after Hezbollah fired a wave of rockets targeting communities in northern Israel, including Kiryat Shimona. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed dispatching interceptors to engage the projectiles, launching immediate retaliatory airstrikes against the active launch sites in southern Lebanon. The volatility comes amid daily violations of a recently extended 45-day interim ceasefire. Despite the renewed fighting, in-person border security talks mediated by the United States and Washington are reportedly continuing as both sides attempt to stabilise the fragile diplomatic framework. And that's all we've got time for, but please stay with us here on NewsX World as we bring you more news updates coming to you from around the world.